Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Aaron.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. All eyes are on Dallas today as health officials try to figure out how to prevent the deadly Ebola disease from spreading even more. Fears are rising after this weekend brought news of a second case of Ebola inside the U.S. Our Gary Lane has more.
Investigators are trying to figure out how a nurse who treated Ebola patient Eric Duncan contracted the deadly disease. The hospital says she followed Centers for Disease Control protocols and wore protective gear, a face mask, gloves, shoe, and leg covers. But the CDC says there was a breach of protocol, perhaps when the protective gear was removed, and that caused her infection. One nurse suggests more needs to be done than just pointing fingers at nurses.
When the nurses become infected, they are blamed for not following the protocols. That is not going to work.
The infected nurse is apparently in her 20s. She started feeling symptoms Friday and drove herself to the hospital. Hazmat crews decontaminated her apartment, and that made at least one neighbor uneasy.
Definitely it's scary being in Dallas, but then when it's like right here.
A recorded telephone message was sent out to Dallas residents.
Please be advised that a healthcare worker who lives in your area has tested positive for the Ebola virus.
CDC Director Thomas Frieden says it's possible other healthcare workers who came in contact with Duncan may also be infected.
Unfortunately, it is possible in the coming days that we will see additional cases of Ebola.
No other healthcare workers have shown Ebola symptoms, but as a precaution, at least one other worker was placed in isolation. If other U.S. Ebola cases are possible, if not likely, what should be done to stop the deadly disease from spreading? A former director of the CDC says only 4 U.S. hospitals are currently prepared to handle Ebola patients. They're in Montana, Nebraska, Georgia, and Maryland. So potential cases should probably be transferred there. So far, Ebola in the U.S. has been contained to Dallas. 2 other suspected cases, one in Los Angeles and another in Boston, were false alarms. Gary Lane, CBN News.
The death toll has reached another tragic milestone in Liberia, and the country's president and vice president are calling people to pray for their nation. Both leaders sat down with CBN's George Thomas for an exclusive interview. Here's his report from Monrovia.
News that the Ebola death toll past 4,000 was on the minds of many Liberians who are meeting regularly to pray for their country. What this crisis has done, though, is drive so many people to places of worship. Churches every Sunday are jam-packed. One such church experiencing unprecedented attendance is Bethel Cathedral of Hope.
Liberia is not a strange nation when it comes to crisis, and so we have that resilience by the grace of God, to be hopeful and to rise up in the midst of impossible situations.
Liberia's President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a committed Christian, told CBN News in this exclusive interview that it is vital churches play a calming role in the midst of a national calamity.
When you meet circumstances that you don't understand and that you don't control, that you can turn somewhere. And where do you turn? You have to turn to your faith. You have to turn to God. And that's a Liberian experience that's deep-rooted.
A few weeks after the Ebola crisis erupted, Liberia's vice president helped launch weekly prayer meetings, encouraging Christians to take hold of God. He told CBN News in this exclusive interview how he's praying for his country.
And my prayer is that God will help us overcome this in the shortest time possible and console those that are bereaved, and also help us to understand our current predicament and work as a nation.
A nation putting all its natural and spiritual resources together to defeat a deadly enemy. George Thomas, CBN News, Monrovia, Liberia.
The pastor of a Houston megachurch sent his congregation packing this Sunday, literally. Pastor Kerry Shook of Woodlands Church cut his message short and asked members to go and pack bags of food for Africans trying to survive the Ebola crisis.
We cut the sermon in half, and now we're living the sermon, and we're packing 200,000 meals to go to West Africa, the Ebola-affected areas where people are really starving because they can't get food because they're quarantined.
People of all ages made their way to the packing station, 70 of them in rooms around the church campus. They packed bags with rice, soy protein, and vitamin-enriched dehydrated vegetables, each bag providing a highly nutritious meal for as many as 6 people. The Woodlands Church is urging all of its members to get busy meeting the needs of others. That's the slogan, and it's everywhere on staff T-shirts, banners, and a display of Carrie and Chris Shook's most recent book. The Shooks encourage other pastors around the country to cut their message short on November 16th and do like he did, send their congregations out to help their neighbors or serve needy people a world away.
ISIS is still advancing and taking new ground despite U.S. airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. In the past few days, the Islamic State has been blasting the Syrian city of Kobani. The U.S. says that Turkey has now given permission to use their bases against ISIS. But heavy fighting is continuing for the control of Kobani near the Turkish border, and ISIS is threatening to wreak havoc on the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. At least 58 people were killed and more than 100 wounded in multiple suicide bombings near the capital city. General Martin Dempsey says the Islamic State came within 15 miles of the airport of Baghdad. He warned if the Islamic State sweeps into Baghdad, residents there could be massacred.
Whether there are still 5,000 people there or not is a matter of conjecture at this point. But I have no doubt that ISIL will conduct the same kind of horrific atrocities if they have the opportunity to do so.
Meanwhile, coalition partners continue to look to the U.S. for more military might. President Obama has resisted calls for a no-fly zone over Syria.
Turning now to healthcare concerns here in the U.S., many insured people are struggling with medical costs despite having health coverage. A new survey from the Associated Press found that 1/4 of those with private health insurance don't have much confidence in their ability to pay for unexpected medical expenses. The strongest concern came from people with higher deductible plans. Those people pay a significant share of their medical bills before insurance actually kicks in, and many of them were more likely to skip treatment instead of depleting their savings.
Chase and Wells Fargo are using callers' voice prints to fight fraud. That's according to an investigation conducted by the Associated Press. A recent AP survey found that more than 65 million people have had their voice prints taken. Privacy advocates and some legal experts are questioning the practice because callers don't give their consent for biometric analysis. Some in the industry argued this is a more secure alternative for authentication. Many governments and businesses also use voice printing.
The Family Research Council is urging Christians to get involved in next month's elections. The conservative group says pastors and their congregations cannot afford to sit this one out. In a Sunday evening webcast, the churches around the country, the FRC President Tony Perkins urged Christians to vote for candidates who reflect biblical values on abortion, marriage, and religious freedom. And Reverend Rick Scarborough of Vision America urged pastors to use their pulpits to address moral issues. Scarborough said, quote, "If the pastors remain silent, the country is going to fall off the cliff. We're close now."
Former Republican presidential candidate Mike Huckabee warns he'll leave the Republican Party if it stops opposing same-sex marriage and abortion. On the American Family Association's radio show, Huckabee said if the GOP gives up those positions, quote, "I'm gone. I'll become an independent. I'll start finding people that have guts to stand. I'm tired of this. I'm utterly exasperated with Republicans and the so-called leadership of the Republicans who have abdicated on this issue. If they continue this direction, they guarantee they're going to lose every election in the future. Guarantee it."
Coming up, he escaped the homosexual lifestyle. Hear what Christian worship leader Dennis Jernigan had to say about the battle over gay marriage in America.
Singer and songwriter Dennis Jernigan has been making Christian music for decades. He recorded worship hits such as "You Are My All in All" and "Nobody Fills My Heart Like Jesus." But what Jernigan is most known for is his freedom from homosexuality, which has now been turned into a documentary called Sing Over Me. And Dennis joins us now via Skype to tell us more about that. Thanks for joining us, Dennis.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Charlene.
And Dennis, your testimony is documented in a new film called Sing Over Me. Tell us a little teeny bit about that.
Well, it's so cool the way the Lord brought this about. I've been telling my story publicly since July of 1988. But this young filmmaking team from Southern California, Jacob and Ashlyn Kinberg, decided they wanted to do a story on my life. And just so happens that Ashlyn's sister was a student at Oral Roberts University at the time, and my daughter and her were friends because my daughter attended there as well. And so she told him that she knew how to get in touch with me. The next thing I know, we're on a Skype session, and they're laying the vision before me, and I just asked, what would it take to do a world-class documentary, something that the world would look at and say, oh, it's not just another cheesy Christian documentary. This is the real deal. He said we could do it, shoestring budget, $30,000. So we began an Indiegogo campaign, and in 40 days raised $40,000. And we took 10 days in March of last year, and they followed me around, and I told my story. And it was like taking back stolen ground, because we went back to so many of the places where things had actually happened in my life that before had negative memories, but God redeemed. And I took back that stolen ground in my life. I'm who my Father says I am. And I'll just say this to your viewers as well. I am not defined by my past. I am not defined by what tempts me. Jesus did not get to choose what he was tempted by, so I don't get to choose what I'm tempted by. But certainly by the power of Jesus Christ, I have the option. We are people of choice. We're human. We have been given the power of choice. We can always choose. So my past doesn't define me. My temptations don't define me. My circumstances don't define me. The gay community does not define Dennis Jernigan. Dennis Jernigan does not get to define Dennis Jernigan. Only my Maker gets that privilege. And the way I've done that is I've sought him, and he has revealed himself to me. So in the documentary, we get to really tell the whole story. And I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of these young people who have the courage to stand up and say, wait a minute, there's another side to the story. There's another part of this issue. There are people walking in freedom.
And Dennis, what would you say to someone struggling with same-sex attraction?
I would say that's easy. Seek Jesus. That sounds so trite and so simplistic, but it is what I did. Most asked question of my life is, was your healing instant, or has it been a process? And the answer is absolutely yes to both of those questions. In an instant, I was born again, given a brand new identity. I was as saved as I could be from my old life. But the other side of that coin is the process of my healing looks a lot like Lazarus. When Lazarus came forth from the grave, he was fully alive in Jesus. When I was born again, I became fully alive in Jesus. But Lazarus was not as free as he was going to be. And we know that because Jesus said to those around Lazarus, loose from him the grave clothes. Wow. Can you imagine being in the grave for 3 or 4 days, and then suddenly you're brought back to life? Would you want to sit still and quietly proclaim how awesome that was? Or would you want to shout it and jump and dance for joy? Well, you couldn't, because you were wrapped up in the garb of a mummy. For the past, since 1981, I've been walking towards Jesus and asking him to show me who he says I am. And he says, son, things like this: you don't look good clothed in that anger. Who told you were an angry man? Son, let's rip that away. That's part of the old identity. That's not who defines you anymore. Look, that heart of peace I planted in you, that's exposed now. Be that. And that's what I would say to anybody. Seek Jesus. Amen. Let him show you your true identity. Walk within the bounds of what his parameters for life and living. And let me just say this too. We come to Jesus and we give him everything we are. That includes our soul, but it also includes our intellect. Have we laid our intellect? Our mind is the battleground. Have you ever laid your intellect before the foot of the cross? Have you ever laid your sexuality, asking God, show me your purposes, your intention for my sexuality, at the foot of the cross?
Thank you so much for your testimony and sharing that with us today. Thank you so much for being with us. God bless you.
Thank you, Charlene. And can I just add that there is also an autobiography in addition to the documentary that hopefully will fill in some of the blanks that the viewers will come up with as they watch the movie. Excellent. So those are both available by the same title, Sing Over Me.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, see how the fight to bring Bibles into public schools is spreading around the nation. Prayers at high school football games are being challenged in 2 states. Students at a South Dakota high school can still pray before their games, but coaches can no longer lead them. The Aberdeen Central High School ended the practice following a complaint from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. The group says the prayers violate the Constitution, but an area pastor says the rights of coaches are now being violated. Now, the same atheist group is challenging football prayers in a Delaware school district as well. Well, CBN News told you before about a successful Bible club in a public school in Pennsylvania. Well, now they are taking their message to other parts of the country.
And they've even gotten the attention of movie makers. Paul Strand has this encouraging story.
The men who helped build one of the world's largest and most fun public school Bible clubs brought their style and secrets to Boston recently. Area churches, parents, and students heard about the Christian kids of Red Bank Valley High School in rural Pennsylvania, partly because of CBN News coverage.
The question is whether the things that make a school Bible club so popular in small-town Pennsylvania can be transferred to the big city. Some in Boston want to find out.
Joe Harmon has advised the Red Bank Christian kids since they started and now runs schoolbibleclub.com to help others get going and thrive.
I think kids are kids no matter where they're at. I think they can be motivated to learn the Bible in the same way as in rural Western PA or the big city of Boston. You guys get to be the wind.
Pueden ser el viento.
So practice it. Ready?
Practiquen.
The Red Bankers pour on lively presentations and wacky skits to keep their meetings fun and appealing. Here they had the Boston kids acting out Jesus walking on the water. But not only did they play Jesus and the disciples, but the boat, the waves, and the winds, too.
Shake the boat! Shake the boat! Shake the boat!
I want to do that.
Sabrina Boilio stands ready to join other Christian classmates and bring the Bible to her desperately under-churched student body.
When I ask some people about God in the school, nobody knows.
It's worth a try.
Zel Sosita thinks it might be the only way to reach some students.
There's like a lot of people that don't go to church because it's so strict, or like, oh, church is boring.
Still, in a time when many Americans believe the Supreme Court tossed God and prayer out of the public schools, these parents and students wondered whether such clubs would be a defiant flouting of the law.
We're not trying to incite these kids to go back and be rebellious youth. I just talked to a student earlier who said that his teacher told him to put the Bible away. He wasn't allowed to have it, even to carry it around in school. And I told him, I said, you still respect and obey your teacher. However, legally you are allowed to carry your Bible around in school, and it's okay.
And Harmon says some resisting school administrations may just need a bit of gentle schooling about what the law says they must allow.
These students here in Boston, the students across America, have the right to have Bible clubs.
Some may feel a public school just isn't the right place for a Bible club. But what's great about America is it's still up to the students.
Not according to the principal and teachers in the new film Uncommon. They bully students trying to do a Bible study and a play based on the Bible.
There cannot and will not be any Bible activities on the premises of Rosewood High School.
Actor and co-producer Eric Estrada wanted to bring Uncommon to Red Bank Valley High because this public school gets law and liberty so right as compared to the film's fictional school that ends up in court trying to stifle its students' religious rights.
If a teacher says to them, you can't pray at lunch, you can't pray at graduation, you can't wear that t-shirt that says Jesus loves you and you love God. And no, they can say, up your nose with a rubber hose, I'm going to pray.
Red Bank students and parents turned out for the film by the hundreds.
Freedom forms the very foundation of our rights, your rights, the rights of students in public school. The school officials must respect that freedom. Freedom is not freedom if you're forced to exercise it in private.
Red Bank Student Bible Club member Rachel Hook heard the movie was coming for a special showing and wrote her own song about Christian kids in schools and called it Uncommon.
You could see the light in there.
One of the movie's producers heard the song, had Rachel record it professionally, and it'll be on the film's soundtrack. You can hear it at uncommonfilm.com.
I just wrote it for myself. I didn't even think my family would hear it.
It's nice to be in a school that is not a godless vacuum.
A movie star coming here to Red Bank to show his new film, hundreds of Bostonians asking Red Bank to come show them how to do student Bible clubs. Just two more ways this club that CBN News has helped make famous is continuing to make its mark in the world. Paul Strand, CBN News, Red Bank Valley High.
Hillsong United raked in 5 top honors at the Dove Awards this year, including Artist and Song of the Year. The event was co-hosted by rapper Lecrae and Bart Milliard from the band Mercy Me. Hillsong's band leader says their winning song, Oceans, was written to help non-Christians connect with Jesus, as well as to encourage Christians coping with the life's ups and downs. Hillsong Church also received a special Lifetime Achievement Award. Other winners included the band Switchfoot and Skillet.
And finally today, Season 11 American Idol finalist Colton Dixon is breaking the mold with his music. CBN's Angela Zadopak gets the scoop on how he's using his platform to glorify Christ.
His last album, A Messenger, set first-week sales records for a Christian artist. Now Colton Dixon fans have another album coming their way called Anchor. I recently caught up with Colton Dixon in New York City on his new album. I wanted to find out what are his songs all about and how did he make it happen.
I had just released A Messenger, my first record, and realized how easy it was to get caught up in a current of a schedule, and I needed stability. I needed a foundation or an anchor, so to speak. And I also realized that I couldn't count my time on stage as my personal Jesus time.
Those challenges he faced led to the song More of You, which Colton calls the heartbeat of the album.
Imagine 2 cups of water. 1 cup represents you and the other represents God. The water in your cup represents anything that you're putting before God. It could be entertainment, it could be your job, your family. What I've realized is that if we want to experience the full potential of God's love and power in our lives, we have to empty our cups first.
To challenge himself and fans to anchor themselves, Colton went to new depths for the album's eye-catching cover.
We actually plunged underwater, and it was freezing. We tried the oxygen tank at first, and normally when people use oxygen tanks, they have a mask and something covering their nose. We didn't think that through, so as I tried to breathe, it wasn't fun for those few minutes.
For the first time in history, Christian music will grace soda cans across the country, featuring Dixon's music with a free song download on 25 million Mountain Dew cans.
We included a free download of a song called Our Time Is Now. It's a song I wrote with Toby Mac. So if you find one of the Mountain Dew cans, be sure to check that out.
Angela Zadopak, CBN News, New York.
Go Colton. Well, that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
We want to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a marvelous Monday, everybody.